Hi, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to Evoke Therapy Program's broadcast. And tonight, Michael is the gift that keeps on giving because she's also invited Chelsea here this evening, who I also know. And I thought I just invited her last second to share with us a little bit about her idea about meditation and mindfulness and take us through a short mindful breathing meditation to begin our episode. So I'm going to turn it over to her after she shares with us her thoughts, takes us through the exercise, which I will simply be a participant. Then I'm going to bring us to some slides and some educations before I open it up to all of your sharing and questions. So Chelsea, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Brad, for inviting me to spontaneously do this. I love that Michael invited me to join this tonight. It was much needed, so I cannot wait to hear what you have to share. So we'll dive into a little meditation, everyone. Get seated nice and comfortable, laying down, whatever is best for you in this moment. You really want to be able to feel grounded, allow those sits bones to ground down into the earth to where you have that core connection. So we will lengthen up our spine, engage our lower bellies, open our heart and chest, lengthen throughout the spine and the crown of the head, and gently close our eyes. Coming into our Dirga 3-part breath, inhaling through the lower belly, ribs, and chest. Exhaling from the chest, ribs, and belly. You may feel a lot of energy moving throughout your body, anxiety, stress. Allow this breathing technique to ground you down to the center of the earth. Inhaling the lower belly, ribs, and chest. Exhaling from the chest, ribs, and belly. Layering on your Ujjayi breath, where the tip of your tongue touches the back of your 2 front teeth, and a relaxed jaw continues. So you'll have a bit of an ocean sound moving throughout the back of your throat. Continuing with that Dirga breath, layering on the Ujjayi, inhaling through the lower belly, ribs, and chest. Exhaling from the chest, ribs, and belly. Having a 4-count inhale and a 4-count exhale. Allowing the thoughts to come and go as they please. This is a moment for you to be the observer in this space, in your flesh, in your heart, in this world. Grounding down to that center of the earth, knowing we are moving through a phase, and this too shall pass. Inhaling through the lower belly, ribs, and chest. Exhaling from the chest, ribs, and belly. Relaxing those shoulders down the back body. Allowing the heart and chest to open. Beginning to focus on that third eye at the center of your forehead. Allowing that space to open and to release. Letting go of any tension within your fingertips or jaw. You can take a circle throughout the neck, moving at your own pace. Keeping that spine nice and lengthened. Continuing with that ocean sounding breath. As our body begins to relax and be in this present moment, sitting here with this group of people, continue to allow yourself to open up, to be vulnerable. Inhaling through that lower belly, ribs, and chest. Exhaling from the chest, ribs, and belly. Breathe, relax, feel, watch, and allow. Where can you let go of even more attention? Where can you relax into your body? A little deeper, and a little softer. Being aware of the sensations and sounds that are happening within you and outside of you. Recognizing the things that you are in control of and the things that you are not in control of. Inhaling through the lower belly, ribs, and chest. Exhaling from the chest, ribs, and belly. Allowing the belly to expand as you inhale. And relax to the back of the spine as you exhale. Recognizing the moments of where there is dis-ease and how we can separate dis and ease. We allow the ease to flow through ourselves as we become connected to this present moment. Taking a few more rounds of your Dirga and Ujjayi breathing techniques. Feeling that connection to the center of the earth as we ground down and lengthen. Gently opening our eyes. We're going to move into another breathing technique called Nadi Shodhana, which is balancing of breath between the right and left side of your nose, your nostrils. And you're actually going to be creating a complete exchange of air within your left nostril and the right side of your brain, and your right nostril within the left side of your brain. And you're also going to be offering a complete exchange of air within your lungs at the same time. So really clearing out that carbon dioxide. So Nadi Shodhana, you're going to take your right hand into Vishnu Mudra to where your index finger and middle finger fold down into your palm. And you'll be alternating your nostrils between your thumb and your ring finger. You can't really keep it up, which is fine. But you're going to place your right thumb to your right nostril. You'll inhale through the left. Take your ring finger, plug off the left, and exhale through the right. Inhale through the right. Plug it off and exhale through the left. Gently closing your eyes. Inhale through the left. Plug it off and exhale through the right. Inhale through the right. Plug it off and exhale through the left. Moving at your own pace with this breathing technique. Layering on your Dirga and Ujjayi breath if you'd like, or you can just focus on alternating your nostrils. Good. Taking a few more rounds of this breathing technique. Alternating that air within your nostrils. Getting a complete exchange of air within your lungs. Releasing that carbon dioxide. Allowing yourself to be here in this present moment. As you take your last exhale through the left nostril, you can release your hands and keep your eyes closed. Coming back to your natural rhythm within your breath. Feeling that sense of groundedness and purpose within yourself and the task that you can take care of in this moment. This is a bright home in which I live. This is where I ask my friends to come. This is where I want to love all the things. It has taken me so long to learn to love. This is the temple of my aloneness, and I belong to that aloneness, as long as I belong to my life. There is no house like the house of belonging. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Brad.
Thank you, Chelsea. That was a beautiful start. I'm going to release you back into. All right. That's a great way to start it. Thank you, Chelsea. Thank you so much. I wanted to start off. I saw Chelsea on here tonight. She's a friend of Michael's and a friend of mine. And I know she has a practice, so I thought we would just spontaneously ask her, and I'm very grateful for her to join us. So somebody just asked, first of all, if you can have the recording. Absolutely, you can have the recording. All of our broadcasts go right into the podcast app the next morning. I have a slide to talk about that as we go along this evening. But let me share with you some of my thoughts this evening. I wanted to start off with the breath and with being present because I think it's become very apparent to everybody here of how difficult it is to be in the present moment. So many of our addictions and so many of our self-medicating, so many of our distractions um, really are attempts to not be present with where we are. And as I thought about this tonight, I thought about the idea of being grateful. I'll share with you my own perspective on this. There's a lot of, I guess it would be advice out there that we should be grateful, that we could be more grateful today. And people are simply advising us to be grateful. I personally have never found that to work for me. But what I have found to work for me is that gratitude comes out of mindfulness. And by mindfulness, I don't want to make it too difficult to understand. I just mean being present with all of my feelings. Chelsea just took us through a breathing exercise to be mindful of our breath. But there are many other ways to be mindful. You can be mindful in your eating. Some of you may have heard of that. You can be mindful in your walking. You can be mindful with virtually every activity that you participate. I think of therapy as a kind of a mindfulness, a talking mindfulness where you're sharing with one other person present what you're feeling, thinking, wanting, afraid of, all that's going on for you. So for me, gratefulness comes out of being able to feel everything. I shared with you the idea the other day, the Buddhist idea that the first thought that many of us have when we get a toothache is we think of the non-toothache, right? How many of you can relate to that? That the moment that you get a toothache, you start to remember that you've been taking for granted the non-toothache. Well, mindfulness is a practice of paying attention to what you feel right now, not just the pleasant feelings, but all of your feelings. And for me, what comes out of that inherently is a kind of a gratitude. I talked about the idea of breathing to begin, and Chelsea took us through a breathing exercise. And I said this last night because it was an awareness that I had this weekend while I was meditating, that if any of us were to go to get the coronavirus, the first thing that we would notice is our inability to breathe freely. Isn't that an interesting idea that one of the most common invitations to mindfulness is to focus on your breath? And the virus that is present and sweeping our planet right now is a virus that makes it difficult for us to breathe. So, in the event that any of us should get that, and of course, I hope that that not be the case, I want to take some time now while we all can breathe freely and appreciate what we have. So, if you want to think about it that way, it could be something that you can lean into. Realize that right now, in this moment, for all of us, that you can breathe. With the idea of mindfulness, I want to share with you this quote from Thich Nhat Hanh. Thich Nhat Hanh talked about this. He said, if you feel irritation or depression or despair, recognize their presence and practice this mantra. Dear one, I am here for you. You should talk to your depression or your anger just as you would to a child. You embrace it tenderly with the energy of mindfulness and say, Dear one, I know you are there, and I am going to take care of you, just as you would with your crying baby. There is no discrimination or dualism here, because compassion and love are you, but anger is too. All three are organic in nature, so you don't need to be afraid. You can transform them. So a lot of us are feeling anxiety and stress right now. We might be out of work. We might be separated from people that we love and care about because of social distancing. And because of that, we're going to have feelings of unease, right? We're going to have feelings of pain, feelings of loss, feelings of grief. And so by feeling those things, we can also get in touch with our love, right? I shared this the other night. Our fear, if we allow it, if we allow ourselves to feel it, our fear can connect us to our love. It can connect us to other people. We do this exercise at our intensives where everybody draws a painful memory, and then we draw lines between it when we can connect to other people. And virtually every time we end up with a drawing where everybody sees how, in many ways, we are connected in our pain. I think one of the unique things about this particular time of social distancing for all of us is that the way that we find comfort is in our connections. That's why I've invited you all this evening to sit in together and to see each other's names and to make comments and share with each other. And I'm going to open that up a little bit more a little bit later on. But this is just a vehicle for me to be connected to you and for you to be connected to each other. I wanted to share the idea that humor can be a huge relief in our grief, right? When we allow ourselves to feel our grief, when we allow ourselves to move through it, we can also allow ourselves to find joy and humor. I remember, this might sound strange or trivial to some, but I shared this with some close friends. I grew up in Los Angeles. In our family growing up, the Lakers were a big thing. In my family raising my children, the Lakers and Kobe Bryant were a part of the connection between me and my children. It was more than just him as a basketball player. He became this kind of thing, that this person that we all related to. And when he passed away, the first two texts I got of the many that I received were from my two oldest children. And I was on an airplane at the time, and they were sharing with me their profound disbelief and grief in it all. And so for many days and since then, there have been moments when I felt a great deal of pain, not just because of Kobe's loss, because I didn't really know him, but because of what he represented to all of us as a family, this point of connection. And one evening when I was in New York, a few days after he passed away, my daughter said, "Hey, one thing that's helped me, if you're interested, is to look at all these funny moments of Kobe Bryant's life if you want to see them." And she sent them to him. And it was the first time in several days when I felt pure joy. I was watching these Kobe Bryant videos and I was laughing and just experiencing the joy of his life, the joy of what he brought to the world, and the joy that my children and us connected through him on. So finding something funny or humorous, maybe you can share your favorite humorous stand-up or Netflix episode. Somebody told me to watch Tiger King this evening. So right after I finish this, my family and I are going to watch Tiger King. I hear it's absolutely bizarre. I shared back with somebody today a stand-up comic by the name of Simon Amstel or Amstead. I think it's Amstel. Just a little bit of a warning. There's some crude humor. So if that offends you, don't watch it. But he has a very intellectual, therapeutic bent to his humor. So I shared that with somebody this evening. Another thing that some of us are robbed of during this time is purpose. Betsy shared with us last night that she found purpose in being able to be a part of an emergency response team in her community, something that she'd signed up long before. She said to me the other day that she never anticipated that she would ever be called to action, but she signed up for emergency response community group. And now, of course, they're being called into action. One of the things that I've noticed that some of my work, I'm able to work from home, has given me purpose or relief from the pain. So we feel our pain, we sit with it, we allow it to go through us, but it's also okay to have moments of respite. I shared the other night the story of the football player Brett Favre. Shortly after his father's passing, he played a Monday Night Football game and had the game of his career. And when he was being asked afterwards, how was that the case? He said to the reporter, "It was a break. I've been grieving for the past several days, and this was a moment where I could relax." So, like Chelsea talked about in the opening, we watch and observe how we're feeling. We allow ourselves to feel it. We practice non-judgment. The quote from Thich Nhat Hanh is really a practice of non-judgment. And here's the trick. Here's the stumbling block for many of us. We have been taught to first of all avoid our pain, right? That's some kind of ideal. When my daughter was recovering from a very severe knee injury many years ago, we were working out with our personal trainer together. And the trainer observed that my daughter Emma was limping while she was running sprints. And he called her over and he said, "What's going on?" And she said, "My knee's hurting really bad." And she said, "But I still want to do it. You know, it's part of my physical training." And the trainer said to him, "If you favor your knee, you're going to get injured. So I'll let you run if you don't need to favor it. But if you need to favor it, you're possibly going to injure yourself even worse." And that's such a profound idea. I shared my own experience with marathons and triathlons, that idea that you focus on the pain to kind of work through it. If it's a true injury, then you're going to need to stop. and attend to it. But if it's not a true injury, it's going to eventually be something that you work through. And during one of my marathons, in fact, the fastest one I ever ran, I started to get a pain in my calf, a lingering issue that had happened to me during my training. And I followed the advice of a coach, and I focused on the pain in my calf. I told my partner who I was running with to go on without me. I couldn't keep up the pace, but I was going to focus on a slow, measured run and focus on my right calf. And it had never happened to me before, but it was this miraculous moment 4 or 5 miles later, and it completely went away. And I ended up with the fastest marathon time in my life. So there's something in our culture, there's something in our lives, there's something in our mental health that is connected to this idea of feeling what we feel, of leaning into it, allowing ourselves to move through it and attend to it, and finding moments of respite also, not punishing ourselves unnecessarily, that somehow we're doing a disservice to ourselves or to others that we love if we're not feeling it all the time. It's okay to find moments of purpose, to find moments of relief and of humor. I thought about this when thinking about the connection between our pain, our fear, and our love. Khalil Gibran talks about joy and sorrow this way. He says, "Your joy is your sorrow unmasked, and the selfsame well from which your laughter rises was oftentimes filled with your tears. And how else can it be? The deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain. Is not the cup that holds your wine the very cup that was burned in the potter's oven? And is not the lute that soothes your spirit the very wood that was hollowed with knives? When you are joyous, look deep into your heart, and you shall find it is only that which has given you sorrow that has given you joy. When you are sorrowful, look again in your heart, and you shall see that in truth you are weeping for that which has been your delight." Last week, for those of you who weren't with us, we had these powerful moments as a group. Many people attended several of these broadcasts last week when I first decided to do them, opening them up to the public. And the first day or two, there was just a tremendous amount of anxiety and tension and fear and pain and loss. And as the week progressed by the last one, and there were tears shed by me, I can't attest to anybody else, but there were tears shed by me during those broadcasts. And as we moved toward later in the week, the kind of comments that were being shared were about joy and gratitude. And it wasn't, again, for me, it wasn't because I followed some imperative to be grateful. It wasn't at all. It was because I leaned into this process with you all. I reached out to you partly to give me purpose, because this is my purpose in life, but partly to ease my own suffering. I said this to you last night. This for me, seeing these names, seeing Anne and Barbara and Becky, Berlin, Betsy, Bruce, Chelsea, David, Debbie, Ellen, Jennifer, Joel, Julie, Lee. I'm glad you made it, Lee. Lisa, Marissa, Mary, Michael, Pam, Pamela, Reagan, Robin, Sally, Sherry, Sylvia, Tatiana. Seeing you here, seeing you the past several nights has given me a great sense of community. You know, when people get treatment for addictions, what's the first most prominent thing that many of them do or are invited to do? It is to go to a group where there is community, right? They can't do it on their own. And I think there's this idea sometimes that somehow there's virtue in doing it on your own. There's virtue in picking yourselves up by your bootstraps. There's virtue in the anonymous gift that we give to somebody. There might be just as much or equal or maybe even more virtue at times of asking for help. Chelsea said in the opening, leaning into and feeling our vulnerability about being here, about being present. The very fact that you're attending tonight says you want connection. There's vulnerability in that ask. So And years ago, what I learned when I was younger, when I thought that by far, I thought it was a clear rule that giving an anonymous gift was the greatest virtue. I realized that in some ways, the gift of my presence, right, the gift of my relationship to somebody who was suffering was just as much, and in some cases, even more of a gift than something anonymous. So it's all one, right? It's our joy and our sorrow are the same thing. Our pain, loss, and our love are the same thing. Our fear and what we care for are the same thing. Our inevitable pain and our awareness of what we have right now, our mindfulness of what we have right now, are connected to each other. And if it should so be that one of us on this broadcast ends up with the coronavirus, and I hope that's not the case, like I said earlier, the first thing that we're going to notice is how difficult it is for us to breathe, so we can focus on that a little bit. I wanted to share this with you all tonight because it's one of my favorite ideas from Ram Dass. I think it's from his book, The Only Dance There Is. If you want a book about mindfulness, that along with Thich Nhat Hanh's book that I mentioned earlier would be two books that I would recommend. And Ram Dass, in fact, I watched a documentary. You can see it on Netflix, I believe. It's just a short half an hour. It showed him in the waning days of his life and what he was doing. And you saw so much joy and the simple pleasures. He would be carried out, he'd be wheeled out, and I think he lived in Maui in his wheelchair along this path, and he would get in the water and he would sit in this raft, this where he would kind of float in the water, and people would gather around him, and he was just appreciating what he knew were the last few days of his life. And he talks about this idea that we're all just walking each other home. So those were just some thoughts that I had in the beginning this evening that I wanted to share with you. I would love to open it up to questions, any sharing, anything from practical tips. If there's something funny that you want to share with the group, tell us the name, tell us where to find it. You can give us a statement or two about it. Any comments that you want to make to each other, I'm happy to open it up to the public, to the group. So David asked the question, is it possible to be an observer too often? I'll let also, I think that was a phrase that Chelsea used when she was inviting our meditation. I think in the way that Chelsea was describing, and she can comment on that herself, um, I think what she was suggesting is a non-judgment. See, I didn't tell you the full idea behind the thing where we trip up. Most of us think the solutions to our problems are something akin to self-hatred. And that might seem like a dramatic statement. But how many times do I hear clients say, I need to be confronted. I need to be kicked in the butt. Right? Or I have to, I need to, I must. Even with our children. See, there's something, this goes back to the work that I do with parents and family. I'll tell you this story from a long time ago. I was working with a young woman in a group, and she was graduating from our program. And just prior to her graduating from the group, one of her close friends in the group broke several of the rules and was a big distraction to the rest of the group, had violated a lot of the group safety, a lot of the group norms, had caused a lot of chaos and turmoil in the group. And this young woman, when she was graduating, she basically said to this person who had made all these mistakes just prior to her graduating, she said, I'm not going to let you participate in my graduation ceremony because I want you to think about the impact that you had on everybody else. And as we were sitting together and she was telling me this story, I was visiting with her after she had graduated the program. We were discussing it. I was discussing it with her parents there. And I said to her father, I said, do you see the lesson that she's learned? She's learned that when she does something quote unquote wrong, which is really just a symptom, right? Evidence of some kind of pain or wound or injury. That's what wrong behavior is. She thinks the solution is punishment. She doesn't know that the solution or the balm is more love. It doesn't mean that there's no boundaries ever. It just means that we increase our love when somebody's suffering. We increase our attention, our focus, and our compassion with them. So what I interpreted Chelsea to invite us to do is to be the observer as we watched our thoughts go in and out of focus is a practice of compassion and non-judgment. And I wrote about this in my new book, the Audacity to Be You. It is counter to everything that we think, including what most therapists thinks. Most therapists think. And when I've trained new therapists, they say to me, Brad, I had a staff member say to me this last summer. He said to me when I was teaching this to an in-service, he said, but don't we need to kind of confront and challenge the students on their thinking so they stop, for example, justifying their behaviors? And I said, I know it would seem like that's what we need to do, but my idea is that you respond to them or you're with them in such a way that they don't need to justify anymore. Think about that. Think about being with somebody in such a way that they don't need a defense because there's no threat. A defense is something that we put up to protect us from pain and from perceived or imagined hurts that are coming at us, right? That potential hurts, I want to say. But if you're with somebody in such a way that they don't need to defend themselves or rationalize or defend themselves, you start to have a different kind of impact on them. A great reference is Johann Hari. Just Google Johann Hari and everything you think about addiction, or even Rat Park. And you will hear a wonderful TED Talk, a 14.5-minute TED Talk on how everything that we think about addiction to threaten disconnection and punishment and legal recourse is exactly the opposite of what people suffering with addiction need. People are looking for connection. They're looking for the kind of feeling that comes from connection. So that is what we talk about. I'm glad that the breathing was helpful for you, David. Lee, I'm glad that you're with us. Lee's in South Florida and giantly grateful for this connection. Thank you. Chelsea said, and you can read along with me, of course. Yes, non-judgment is correct in relationship to what I was saying with being an observer. We're only in control of what we can control by allowing ourselves to be the observer when we let go of expectation within ourselves and others. I know it seems counterintuitive. Listen to the podcasts, read the books. Just for a point of reference, I've lowered my books to the lowest amount that Amazon will allow me to lower them. So the ebook for the new one is $2.99, and I'm going to keep that up during this period of social distancing. So it teaches this idea that is counterintuitive. It's really the work of attachment. And what Chelsea was inviting us was to take a position of a welcoming mother. What Thich Nhat Hanh is telling us here is to look at the crying baby inside of us. To look at ourselves and our distress. The more we're able to do it with ourselves, the more we're able to do it with each other and with our children. So, and it's a practice. And we weren't shown it. I want to say that to you as clear as I can. This was not modeled to us. And it wasn't their fault. It wasn't modeled to them. And I could keep the statement going back generation after generation. This idea of boundaried but non-judgmental love wasn't shown to us. What was shown to us is when our parents got upset, angry, disappointed in us, that was an indication to us that we were off course. And when they got happy, excited, proud of us, that we were on course. And then we go out into the world and we don't know who we are without getting feedback from somebody else. And then we spend our entire lives trying to let go of what other people think of us. And we're afraid if we fully let go of what other people think of us, that we'll just become these outlaws, these spiritual, emotional, physical, behavioral outlaws, right? And by the way, there can be a phase of that for sure. But my experience is, in the end, that's best found, in my experience, that's best found in the presence of an empathic other, in my case, a therapist. When we allow ourselves when we find ourselves in a place with a person who loves us just as we are, warts and all, we have this experience of grace that's unimaginable. We can't imagine that we'll be loved for who we are. We think eventually the therapist will get sick of us. Eventually, the therapist will tire of hearing of our ruminating thoughts. And if you get lucky enough to find a therapist who doesn't get tired of you, which I found, and I was skeptical, it only took me 12 years to finally believe her. It changed me. And what did I want to do immediately? I wanted to bring that message back to all of you and to our clients and to our therapists. And now I want to spread it to everybody in the therapeutic field. There are so many therapists in practice in the world who think that it's their job to parent clients the way that they were originally parented, with anger and disappointment, frustration, agitation, not an understanding. So Michael says, thinking about the world right now, I think I am starting to process the levels of grief, from denial to anger to fear to sadness to acceptance, trying to stock up as much as I can on compassion possible right now. Thank you for joining us, Michael, and thank you for sharing. And again, I gave credit to Michael for starting these and also tonight for bringing Chelsea to us. So I appreciate it. I'm doing this as a service for our families and for the public this week, but frankly, it's really a gift to me. If there were nobody on here, I wouldn't do them. So I feel like it's cheating. Jennifer says, in regards to humor, in a podcast, you mentioned wanting to make a joke after the earthquake, but your son stopped you. My husband and I use humor a lot to get through uncomfortable moments, especially with the kids. Can this invalidate their feelings? Absolutely. I mean, it's not one size fits all, right? And even if I use humor all the time to avoid pain, it can become a problem. Sarcasm and humor can become a distraction. When we create our intensive program, we invite people to be mindful of their humor. After this broadcast tonight, I'm going to go watch Tiger King because that's what somebody told me to watch. Sounds absolutely insane, the premise, a documentary. So I'm going to go watch Tiger King tonight. So it's about balance. It's about allowing yourselves to feel everything. A lot of therapists would suggest that the outcome of therapy is integration. I'll give you an example. People will ask the question, is it narcissistic or arrogant to talk about how good I am at something, to really pay attention to my strengths? And the answer is, of course not. That's not narcissistic to be proud of yourself, to like yourself, to talk about that you do something really well. The problem only becomes in our view of ourselves or in our relationships when we're only allowed to be good. That's the problem. People will say to me, the fact that I need external validation, this is probably a more common question. the fact that I need external validation, is that a problem? And I want to be clear about this. Absolutely not. It is a necessary human need and condition to need validation. The problem becomes when we're only validated for our strengths, our beauty, our skills, and our talents. What psychologists will call the part object. If you're only validated, if you're only seen, if you're only appreciated because of the beauty and the strengths and the intelligence that you have, that's a problem. That causes narcissism. But if all of you can be seen, or more of you can be seen, then you're allowed to be all of you. That's why in the parenting literature, they encourage parents not to praise giftedness, strengths, accomplishments, but praise efforts and value mistakes. I've shared the story before. The CEO of the brand Spanx, you might know about that. It's this tight clothing. That's another story altogether. But she talks about growing up that her father would always ask the children and the family at the table every evening, he would say, "Where did you fail today?" And when somebody would share a failure, he would toast a glass of water or a glass of milk to the child. And if somebody didn't have a failure, he would act playfully, mildly disappointed. And what he was trying to teach the children is there's beauty in our mistakes, there's beauty in our detours, there's beauty in our weaknesses and our vulnerabilities. So the problem is not, folks, I want to be as clear as I can. The problem is not needing external validation. Every human being needs it. The problem is when we are only validated for the good parts. Like Carl Jung said, I would rather be whole than good. So when we're around somebody who can see all of us and tolerate it, tolerated is a psychological term for just allowing it to be. When we can be around somebody who can tolerate it, like my therapist said about 12 years ago, she said to me, I've been seeing her for 22 years. Somewhere about 12 years ago, she said to me when I was stammering through a session, she said to me, "Brad, I don't think you understand." She said, "If you came in here telling me you were having sex with a chicken, I would assume you have a good reason and I would want to understand why." And I sat with that at the ridiculousness of the idea for just a moment. And I thought, I don't think I've ever had that in my life. And I'm beginning to believe her. This was about 10 years into my therapy. And I believe her now. I know it to be true now. Debbie says, a comment, what I have learned. Video chat is really helpful compared to texting or even a phone call. Great to convert texts to phone calls, calls to video to feel connections. We have to be present on video. Can be doing other things on the phone and not fully present. Absolutely. Absolutely. We have shifted before the coronavirus. We have shifted because we all work in different areas. I live in Salt Lake City. We have a program in St. George, Park City, Salt Lake City, and Central Oregon. So we have management teams spread out across the West. So we stopped doing conference calls by phone about 6 months ago because everybody was multitasking. The question would come to you and somebody would have to say, either try to fake their way through it, that included me, or just say, "I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention." So now we're requiring video chat. So we're doing everything by Zoom because it's the next level of requiring more presence. So absolutely. Looks like Pamela's typing. So I'm going to wrap up by the top of the hour. So any parting shots, and I'm going to end with a serenity prayer. Actually, I'm going to end with a few slides for some information for you all. But I'll end with a serenity prayer at the end. Pamela says, I've been seeing a therapist for 6 sessions, not feeling comfortable or like she understands me. Do I need to give it more time? Pamela, I'm so glad you asked that question. Let me give you a secret key. First of all, for all of you, you can Google one of two things. Google Brad Reedy, my name, and the words psychology versus therapy, where I wrote a journal article about this. So if you want a longer article, go to Psychology versus Therapy by Brad Reedy. If you want just a blog on the same subject, just go to my website, drbradreedy.com or bradreedy.com, and go to the blogs. And I wrote an article on what to look for in a therapist. But here's the key. This is inevitably, virtually always true. The way you know if you have a good therapist is you tell them how you feel about their connection and see how they respond. And there are two general ways that a therapist will respond. And there's, of course, gradations in between, but the two basic ways are these. If they have an adequate sense of themselves and have done enough work, they'll say to you, I'm so sorry. I am so glad you told me. Thank you for telling me. I feel honored. That was so courageous. Something along those lines. Then they'll ask you questions like, what can I do to be helpful? And they'll just ooze with gratitude and love and respect for what you did. That's kind of one end of the continuum. The other end of the continuum, they'll tell you how you're misunderstanding them. They'll tell you how your perceptions are off. They'll explain to you their approach and your lack of insight into their approach and why the combination of those things has led you to the feeling. In other words, they'll make it about you and your problem. And that's the one way that you know that you have an adequate therapist or not. Is, folks, I can't emphasize this too much, but listen to this. It's pretty easy to talk about other people in sessions. It's more difficult to talk about yourself. But the riskiest thing to talk about in therapy is your relationship between yourself and the therapist, because the risk is that the therapist will respond in the ways that people have responded to you in your past. I had a client that I was seeing individually for many years, and she decided to go to a couples session with her partner, to that therapist. And during the session with by the way, somebody I even knew by name, didn't refer them, but knew by name because they were renowned. She said to the therapist at one point about some kind of upset that she felt with something the therapist said. And of course, the therapist explained to her how she misinterpreted things. And my client, who was in the session at the time, said, "You just did it again." So the therapist went about explaining again how she wasn't hearing her and how she was misinterpreting things. My client said, you keep doing it over and over again. And the therapist, of course, corrected her a third time. And then my client just thought, I'm just going to give up and wait till the end of the session and never come back again. So a little secret, a little hack, if you will, talk to your therapist about your relationship with them and your feelings for them. My article on psychology versus therapy in the NatSap journal, if you just Google Brad Reedy and psychology versus therapy, you can find it, or just go to my website or Google Brad Reedy, what to look for in a therapist. Thanks, Pamela. That was a great, great question. Jennifer says, my son just finished his 12 steps and has 5 months sober. I want to say I'm proud of him, but what can I say instead? Great question, Jennifer. Ask him what matters the most to him. This is not a rule about avoiding saying you're proud, but it weighs heavily or it's irrelevant. My mother tells me she's proud of me all the time, but that doesn't matter too much to me because we don't have the same values. I do like it when she recognizes the hard work and that I've really done a lot to kind of undo some of my own wounding from childhood and parenting. And I'm doing, when she becomes very descriptive. So when she talks about the effort and the work that has gone beneath my success at those more personal items, that feels really good. But to be praised for my external success kind of feels empty. As a child, it loaded very heavily. As an adult, it's irrelevant. I've shared the story that when Bob Dylan was asked about his son, Jacob, when Jacob had a number one album, Bob said, it's irrelevant to me. Bob was raising his son with the idea that it's not his job to make his father proud. And if you can be proud, then you can also be disappointed. That's where I get stuck with my children. If I'm proud of them for their successes, then I can be disappointed for their failures. And I would rather just be present with them in both. Maybe describing what I appreciate it took to have a success, but also when they fail, being empathic and understanding and appreciate what it must be like to be at that low point and to just move forward. So I think it's nuanced and it's more about maybe even think of it as the observer mind, the non-judgmental mind. So thank you for that, Jennifer. I would ask him what he thinks too. And he'll probably think something different 4 or 5 years or 10 years from now. But recognizing the hard work, the stick-to-itiveness, appreciating that, saying to him it's something you can be proud of. I think generally speaking, those can be helpful, but asking him might be the golden key, if you will. David says, thanks again. I talked to Andy and it didn't go smoothly for me. I asked if he could find me someone like you and he laughed at me, hoping I can find somebody good. Thank you, David. If you get stuck again, come back to me. Thank you, Chelsea. You're welcome. You're welcome, Pamela. Can we as parents say, I believe in you? I think that sounds, I mean, again, these are general answers. I'm trying to kind of unpack the psychology behind it. I think yes, but I think most importantly, ask your children what matters to them. Let me go over a couple of things and then I'll wrap up with any last comments. We have intensives coming up if you're interested and want to do a deep dive into your own work. April, of course, is very tentative at this point. May 27th, I would be more confident in. I am now taking over the second Finding You, July 8th. So July 8th and 15th, I'll be running the Finding You 2. England is postponed. If you have any questions, email us at intensives@evoketherapy.com. We encourage all, if you want to do something free, these are online right now in most cases. 12-step support groups. Also, Smart Recovery can be helpful. Refuge Recovery is a Buddhist-inspired recovery program without an emphasis of a higher power. And the National Alliance on Mental Illness is a great place to go to get free resources in your local community, in your local chapter. All of these broadcasts are available on the podcast the next day. Please go to our podcast, share, subscribe. We have 300 episodes so far. We've broadcast over 1,200 in total, and we've kind of replaced some of the older ones. So go to your Apple Podcast on your phone, your iOS device, or Android users can listen on SoundCloud, or you can go to soundcloud.com to listen. Like I said earlier, I have reduced the prices of my 2 books as low as Amazon will allow them to be reduced right now. So during the pandemic and social distancing, The Journey of the Heroic Parent is $12.95. I have no ability to make it lower than that. The Audacity to Be You is $2.99 for ebook and $10.02, a strange number that Amazon gave me as the lowest possible. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you, Chelsea, for my special spontaneous guest. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, and Andra, is that how you say it? And Becky, Berlin, Betsy, Bruce, Chelsea, David, Debbie, Ellen, Ivana, Jennifer, Joel, Julie, Laura, Lee, Lisa, Marissa, Mary, Michael, Pam, Pamela, Reagan, Robin, Sally, Sherry, Sylvia, and Tatiana. Thank you for joining us and for spending an evening with me. I'll be doing these all week. I'll be doing one tomorrow at 5 p.m. and again Thursday at 5:30 p.m. I hope these are helpful for you. Thank you for this point of contact for me. Thank you for connecting with each other, for being vulnerable, and for showing up. Have a great 24 hours, and I'll talk to you tomorrow night. Take care. Bye-bye.